Well, again, welcome. Glad you're here. And Harriet and I are going to start together because that's kind of how this whole thing started. Can you remember when that was?
When we did the writing, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember.
We were down in the living room, fireplace room, and talking about the fact that Joe Garkowiak McReynolds was no longer having a writing group.
Right. Okay.
And Harriet said, we could do that. And so that's how it started. And Harriet had a wonderful, tell that prompt thing that you read. Jog your memory.
Do I have that with me?
No, but just tell about it. Just tell about the job.
Well, we had about a 3-copy sheet that told all kinds of ideas for writing. So, you know, it covered your whole life, really. And it gave so many ideas for each area of your life. And we started with that. People had a pretty good memoir when they got finished with all that stuff. We've sort of branched out.
But the jog your memory was a wonderful thing to have, and it started from the very beginning to where we are now in our lives. So we still call on that, even though we might now call it having prompts. And this month, because it was National Poetry Month, and everybody kind of groans because I always made, because I like poetry, I always made people figure out some kind of poetry reading. Sometimes we gave you had a book and they had to find one poem to respond to. You remember that. She's rolling her eyes. Margaret's rolling her eyes, but now she's writing poetry herself, which shows that it works. And one year, everybody had to go, we had books from the big bookshelf that nobody reads in the fireplace room, and everyone had to find one poem out of there that they could respond to. This year we did it a little differently. People could find any book of poetry that they wanted to, anywhere they wanted to find it, and respond to it, not in writing a poem, but in writing a prose piece, so that jogged your memory. And that's when Harriet found a wonderful book. Show your book.
Oh, yeah. Elementary school, poem book, poetry book from elementary school, because I was a first grade teacher. And so it's got all kinds of children's poems as well as very, what do you call them? They're a little more adult poems. And
so we went, she brought, we also have music in our class. And Harriet brought out that book, and I was a first grade teacher, so I looked through it, and I found one
I
about,
can't talk right now. Don't call me back. Don't call me back.
and I found one about Gagoon with the little green frog one day. Gagoon with the little green frog, Gagoon with the little green frog one day, and his eyes went gag-gagoon. And I had taught that to my first grade class. So needless to say, I loved her poetry book. But Harriet did something different. She was telling a story that she found. There was a poem, we never could find it last night, but it was a poem that she liked the beat to, and she liked the rhythm of it. And so...
That's what I used.
That's what she used.
That's what the beat was.
That's what the beat was. And she was just saying it was kind of an interesting beat, but I looked at it, and it's a rhyming poem with the end rhymes going in a pattern all the way down, so it was not an uncomplicated thing to do. Harriet at the time was going back to school and had 2 young children. And so the poem that she wrote, which is more like jog your memory,
Yeah.
comes her inspiration was the first grade book. So she's going to read that poem to you now.
First, I want you to see this poem as I found it in my stuff. You know, it's dirty, and it's hard to read. So I have a computer, and I typed it, so now I can read it. But it's an unusual meter, I guess you call it. The first and third lines rhyme. The second and third rhyme differently. Like the first one, whirled and unfurled. The 2 and 3, slow and aglow. The third one is cold and hold, but that's the first line and the third line. And then it goes on the rest of the first and third, the first and third. So I've got cold, hold, clean screen, art start, weak, bleak, curled and whirled again. So I'm going to read the whole thing. Called Next Week. Monday comes and I am sure this week, can you hear it? Okay, let's start again. Monday comes and I'm sure this week I'll lick the world. I'll be creative, paint or sculpt, or maybe even sew. I'll make a pot, do macrame. My gift will be unfurled. On Tuesday, when the laundry's done, my plans are taking form. I'll work with fabrics smooth and rough, ideas surge and flow, designs and colors in my head just set my eyes aglow. On Wednesday morning, my child is ill, with fever and a cold. She's home from school with naught to do but paint or sculpt or sew. I encourage her creativity and put my own on hold. On Thursday, as I grocery shop, cook, make beds, and clean, my mind is on my household chores and places I must go. I plan for guests, attend a tea, and watch the TV screen. On Friday, as I pick up toys, I find my daughter's art. I could have done a masterpiece had I not been so slow. It's too late now, the weekend's here. It's not the time to start. On Saturday, I feel depressed. What have I done all week? I didn't paint or sculpt or sew. I've not one thing to show. What can I do to cheer myself, to make the world less bleak? I'll read a book, I'll see a play, and get my dull hair curled. And Sunday's not the day to frown. I'll laugh and celebrate, because every week when Monday comes, I'm sure I'll lick the world. So tell me about the meter of that thing.
Sure.
And I noticed how different this is. So many times you'll have 2 lines rhyme and then 2 more lines rhyme. And this one, the world unfurled, the first and third lines rhyme with each other. And the lines 2 and 3 rhyme like flow and a glow. And then it's 1 and 3 from then on, 1 and 3, 1 and 3, 1 and 3. Cold and hold, clean and screen, art and start, weak and bleak, curled and whirled. It's such an unusual poem. Katie noticed too that when she was reading that.
When we were working on this last night, I was blown away because this was a complicated, and I bet none of you actually heard that the rhyming didn't hit you over the head.
Right.
So it was very subtle, which is not easy to do. And the fun thing, and it shows a little bit how the writer's work group works, is after Harriet read that poem, we started a discussion about women going back to school. Women, Harriet had 2 children. We went around and practically every woman sitting around the table, and Kurt's Connie went back to school at some time in their lives after they had completed 4 years. And we all talked about fitting that kind of schooling into lives, which maybe Harriet's home. And that's the fun thing about the writers group, is that it sparks memories in other people and their own lives. So now we're going to start, and our next reader is going to be Kurt. And when Kurt joined, we got a human, James Harriet, who works with humans and not animals. And Kurt didn't need jog your memory, because he has a wonderful store of memories of his work as a doctor. So we're just going to introduce each other in the group, and one chair is going to be for the reader, and I'm going to move this one away. And welcome to what we're going to do for the rest of the half hour or so.
So what I've contributed mostly have been selections from a group of essays that I wrote in the past describing experiences and patients that I had encountered over the years in medical practice. And this is one of those. Living with abandonment. My years in medical practice, beginning in 1970, included some noteworthy episodes and people. Early patient associations included members of a family, Bob W. and his wife, who resided next door to friends of ours in Brookfield. Bob was probably in his mid to later 60s when I first knew him, but my initial patient contact was with Mr. W., Bob's elderly father. Mr. W. was a garrulous old man, and I was involved primarily with supervising his care in an area nursing home. He was unhappy and depressed, and often on my nursing home visit would say, "Just give me the black pill, Doc." My association with the family continued as Bob W. became a regular patient. By then, he was divorced from his wife. He was something of a rounder and engaged in generous levels of alcohol consumption and cigarette smoking. And he had problems with both coronary heart disease and chronic obstructive lung disease. He was a loner, living by himself in a trailer. He did have an out-of-town girlfriend who visited periodically. She had a small home in the ski community of Telluride in western Colorado and wanted Bob to live with her there, which he planned to do. I had to caution him that due to his pulmonary disease, he likely could not tolerate the altitude unless he was on continuous ambulatory oxygen. But he departed for Colorado anyway, and I never got any follow-up on how it worked out. Unknown to me, Bob had a large black Harley-Davidson motorcycle. He told me about taking it to the south side of Milwaukee one sunny Sunday morning to ride it on the recently rebuilt I-94 south toward Chicago. There wasn't much traffic, and he opened it up. I was going 100 miles an hour. Highway patrol took after him, eventually pulling him over. The patrolman stepped out of his car and back to the motorcycle to address Bob. Bob pulled off his black helmet, revealing his crop of white hair. This surprised the cop, who exclaimed, "Why, you old fart, what the hell do you think you're doing?"
Okay, I wrote this originally for the little newsletter that comes out every couple of weeks, but it has a very strong nature theme, and it's an experience in my life. You know how they say before you die, these moments of your life flash through your mind, you see them again? I hope this is one I will get to see. at that hopefully long distant time. I just called it Underwater Highlight. Ellen and I love Mexico and travel there often. One of our favorite spots is Huatulco on the west coast south of Acapulco. The Pacific Ocean forms 9 pristine bays around Huatulco, bays that offer great snorkeling. I truly believe I could be a much better person if I went snorkeling every day. Some quiet moments among the fishes, rocks, and plants imbue me with a deep sense of peace. I lose track of time and direction, kicking slowly at the surface or diving deeper, following interesting fish as they go about their business of finding food. A fisherman in Huatulco took us out snorkeling in his small powerboat after he had brought in his day's catch. At our first stop, the boat dropped us off near some coral heads. I happily climbed over the side and adjusted my mask. No flippers, those just get in the way entering and leaving the water, whether from the beach or from a boat. I wouldn't need to power my way through the sea. Snorkeling for me is strictly slow-mo. As I swam toward the beach and the seabed turned from coral to sand, a brilliant silver river of fish swam towards me, catching the sun on their scales. There were what seemed like thousands of fish, each about 6 inches long, all moving together in an undulating band of shining silver, much as large flocks of birds do in the air. They swam directly toward me. Just inches before they reached my head, their columns split neatly in 2, and I slipped into the space which suddenly appeared before me. I was surrounded by shards of silver. I swam among them for probably only a few seconds, but those seconds impacted me deeply. For those few seconds, I knew in my core that I was part of nature, not just an isolated human. The fish and I were one. They allowed me into their midst, and for a moment I shared their underwater universe. I belonged with those fish and in that ocean, and together we were all part of the bigger picture of life on Earth. Moments like this refresh my soul. And next we have Janice Collins.
Well, you can work from a prompt, and that's fine. But then the story that you pick, I think, has to have a hook to it, or it has to be interesting to other people. Because you could write about something that was meaningful and interesting to yourself, but maybe not to anybody else. Anyway, this is, I don't know what the prompt for this was, but it's about a little trip we had one time. A chance encounter. What power is it that causes people to meet at a precise and unplanned moment for good or for misfortune? Is the coincidence guided by God's hand, led by a guardian angel, or even the devil? Perhaps it is simply fate, or just dumb luck. I wondered about chance meanings, especially when what happened to myself and my friend Bob one summer. We were cruising along on his motorcycle, 17 miles out of Winnemucca, Nevada, according to the sign we just passed, when a reassuring rumble of the motor suddenly ceased, and we coasted to a soft and silent stop. The motor refused to restart. We were stranded in the middle of and hopeless, surrounded by nothing but tumbling and tumbleweed. We put our helmets at the edge of the road as a sign of distress, hoping that the bright orange color would attract attention and somehow bring us help. Our journey had begun 2 weeks earlier in Milwaukee and had taken us through the Canadian mountains, down the rock-strewn coast of Oregon, and over the hills of San Francisco to our destination, the annual gathering of BMW motorcycle riders in the desert of Prineville, Oregon. We had traveled almost 4,000 miles with nary a mishap. Now here we were, marooned, thankfully unhurt, but unhappily in trouble. How could we continue? Were we safe? Where would we spend the night if it came to that? I said a silent prayer and dared to look at the barren land all around us for a spot where we might pitch our tent. A few concerned motorists stopped with offers of kind but useless help. After some hours of hopeful waiting, there suddenly appeared 2 motorcycle riders who sped past us, stopped, turned around, and returned with welcome and unbelievable offers of help. We were surprised to see that one of the riders was a woman, but we were further astounded to discover where this couple was from. You got it, they were from Milwaukee. What are the chances of meeting someone from home, so far from home? How did it happen that we were all on that road at that same time? It was as if these 2 riders had been sent to find us. I will gratefully accept any explanation. But back to our problem. Inspection revealed that a wire on our motorcycle motor had merely vibrated loose and was easily reattached. It was another piece of fantastic good fortune. Soon we were on our way with our new friends, partying in Salt Lake City with an invitation to their approaching wedding and a chance to meet them again, this time at home in Milwaukee. And now Terry Sundberg is next.
I wrote my piece from a prompt. We're supposed to find a poem about nature and then find one that would relate to you in some way. So I found a poem by Carl Sandburg, and it's called Lake Michigan Morning. Blue and white came out, riders of an early fall morning. The blue by itself, the white by itself. A young lamb, white, crossed on a clear water blue. Blue rollers talked on a beach white sand. Water blown from snow-white mountains met with blue rise of lowland waters. This was an early morning of high price. Blue bowls of white water poured themselves into white bowls of blue water. There was a back and forth, a kiss me, kill me, washing, weaving. Like Carl Sandburg, I'm partial to Lake Michigan. I grew up beside her and witnessed her many moods in every season. Not only did I see her rough seas of an early fall morning when blue bowls of white water poured themselves into white bowls of blue water. There was a time my family had to move out of our lakeshore home for a few days as she was threatening to come inside. She is powerful as well as life-giving. For years I took her for granted, not realizing what a beneficial resource was right under my nose. Water flows abundantly from our faucets because of her. Whereas in other parts of the world, water is a scarce commodity. When sewage and factory waste are cleaned before they flow to our shores, Lake Michigan also becomes a recreational benefit, especially on a hot summer day. Her great body not only carries buoyant vessels, she tempers the weather for those who reside nearby with cooling summer breezes and less bitter cold days of winter. Yes, Carl, A Lake Michigan morning is something special to cherish and protect, for she gives back 100-fold if you give her the respect she deserves. The next reader will be Sue Cottrell.
The poem I'm going to read is titled Each in His Own Tongue. And the poem was a favorite of a dear friend, Josie, whose mother in her last years lived here in memory care. And Josie's loving descriptions of her mother as an artist, a teacher, a naturalist, an activist, and a reciter of poetry just spoke to me, so I was conditioned to love the poem because of Josie. I also like in this poem the gentle differing interpretations of our universe. The author, William Carruth, seems to say that both sides of interpretation are valid, and appreciating the same underlying feeling with just different names for our creation. There's 4 stanzas to the poem, and I just want to give you a couple definitions that I had to look up. In the first stanza, he compares a jellyfish and a saurian, S-A-U-R-I-A-N, which is a dinosaur or a reptilian like creature. And in the 4th stanza, which is the last stanza, he compares Socrates drinking the hemlock and Jesus on the rood, which many of you may know is another word for the cross. So this is his poem, Each in His Own Tongue, William Carruth. A fire mist and a planet, a crystal and a cell, a jellyfish and a saurian, caves where the cavemen dwell, then a sense of law and beauty, and a face turned from the clod. Some call it evolution, and others call it God. A haze on the far horizon, the infinite tender sky, the ripe, rich tint of the cornfields, and the wild geese sailing high. And all over, upland and lowland, the charm of the goldenrod. Some of us call it autumn, and others call it God. Like tides on a crescent sea beach, when the moon is new and thin, into our hearts, high yearnings come welling and surging in. Come from the mystic ocean, whose rim no foot has trod. Some of us call it longing, and others call it God. A picket frozen on duty, a mother starved for her brood, Socrates drinking the hemlock, and Jesus on the rood. And millions who humble and nameless the straight, hard pathway trod. Some call it consecration, and others call it God. William Herbert Carruth.
Isn't it wonderful to hear all the readings? And you know, when you're in a class, it's a little different, but to just sit back and listen, it's lovely. Well, I found 2 short poems by Mary Oliver, and then I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from a prose piece I wrote, that I wrote in maybe March or April when the pandemic shutdown had just started. And then a poem that I wrote when life was starting to come back a little bit again. Mary Oliver. The first poem is, "The poet compares human nature to the ocean from which we came. The sea can do craziness. It can do smooth. It can lie down like silk breathing or toss havoc shoreward, and it can give gifts and withhold all. It can rise, ebb, froth like an incoming frenzy of fountains, or it can sweet talk entirely, as I can do too, and no doubt can you. And the second one is I go down to the shore. Mary Oliver lived on the coast of Maine, so she was very comfortable walking out of the shore every day. I go down to the shore in the morning, and depending on the hour, the waves are rolling in or moving out. And I say, oh, I am miserable, what shall I do? And the sea says in a lovely voice, excuse me, I have work to do. I don't go down to the shore in the morning as did Mary Oliver, who lived along the coast of Maine and wore the ocean breeze like a second skin. I'm a newcomer, a landlubber, who moved from the country 10 years ago and found the lake almost by accident. I knew Bradford and McKinley Beach, but they were not part of my childhood memories. But I do remember the breakwater and my father telling us to be careful and not fall in when we were scrambling over the crumbling cement, far from where my mother waited us safe on shore. It was COVID that made me leave the city streets and head down to the shores of Lake Michigan, to the sand beaches and coves I found there. My fascination with the beach started last year on a foggy day in early April. The pandemic shutdown had begun. The streets were so quiet. I walked to the bluff and on a whim headed down the path to Lincoln Memorial Drive, crossed the street, and made a beeline for the beach. I was the only one there. I walked alone along a strip of sand that was strewn with debris, pieces of driftwood as big as tree branches, a line of stones and shells, bottles, cans, plastics, all the leftovers you could expect after a storm. And though the lake was still that day, barely a ripple to be seen or heard, I could imagine the kind of storm that happened. Storm with high water marks showing how far that water could reach. I learned that day what I saw was a rack line, like we say rack in ruin, proof of how powerful waves are and how the waves can reach and how far they can come and what they can hurl on the shore. And then I wrote a poem that has a totally different tone, walking along Bradford Beach. The diggers are there, children with shovels and pails, waders too in chill water, and dogs, great leaping dogs who love waves and sticks. There's music too, practitioners of yoga, and those like me who walk the rack line in silence, looking for whatever glitters and gleams amid the pebbles, dry grass, and pieces of driftwood. We who come know each other, but seldom talk, give a wave from afar and move on. Solitary searchers honoring what the lake, nature's tumbler, left for us to find. Surfaces and edges frosted and smoothed by currents and storms and time. Encouraging me to create stories with the sea glass I find. Pieces of green and amber glass, heavy crockery and dishware, fragments with flowers and Nordic designs, stylized patterns making me think of those I will never know. Those making and using the whole of what I now find in pieces. Memory holders I plan to place along the windowsill where the sun will find them and make them glow. Our last reader is Marion, and I asked her to read last because her poem just seems to fit with the two themes. She found a poem and also the theme of Earth Week. And I just have to say one thing. This Earth Week wouldn't be happening without Marian.
So the prompt that I worked from, as Katie said, was to find a poem that had something to do with the concepts of Earth Day or Earth Week in any way that we chose, anything that struck us, and then write about why or how it struck us, and share that with the group. So Katie had, as she sometimes does, sent a poem to me by a poet that I was not familiar with, and I was quite taken with it. And so I looked her up on the internet and found some more of her work. And now I'll read you what I wrote to share with the group. I feel quite, I'm reading this as if I was in the group that day. I feel quite like an imposter today, even a bit of a fraud, because first, I can't honestly claim that I chose this poem, but rather that it chose me. Not only am I currently preoccupied by all things Earth Day, as I help prepare for East Castle's annual Earth Week celebration, but it perfectly captures my own conflicted appreciation of Earth's beauty and diversity, and despair over how horribly mistreated by human greed and indifference she has been. Secondly, this piece was not published as a poem per se, but rather as a reflection, more of a short essay that I presumptuously reformatted to look like a poem, at least to my eye. The piece is titled Happy Earth Day by Lynn Unger. I discovered it because our friend and fearless leader Katie shared a different poem by Ms. Unger with me, a real poem. It was titled The Last Good Days, written 2 years later, but on the same theme. It too spoke very directly to me, but even more urgently. So much so that I Googled Lynn Unger and discovered that she had published many more works on the Unitarian Universalist blog, Quest for Meaning. So maybe I came by this poem somewhat honestly after all. In any case, I'd like to share its message with you, with thanks and apologies to Ms. Unger. Happy Earth Day, April 22nd, 2015, by Lynn Unger. It feels a bit strange to say it, Happy Earth Day, a bit like saying Happy Memorial Day or Happy Holocaust Day of Remembrance. Some are important to think about and to honor without being particularly happy. I don't know about you, but I spend quite a bit of time thinking about climate change and mass extinction of species, about the continent of plastic congealing in the Pacific Ocean, about oil spills and tar sands, deforestation, and all the untold ways that we are raising our planet. And happiness is pretty much the furthest thing from my mind. It's a grief I live with, like the terminal illness of a beloved family member. But maybe Happy Earth Day is not such a bad idea. It could be what we need to counter the persistent growl is a day of celebration for the glory of the earth, which not only sustains us humans, but also an astounding variety of life. Just recently, scientists in Costa Rica discovered a new species of glass frog, frogs that are so translucent underneath that you can see their internal organs. And she had a little picture of a frog embedded as a part of the piece, really. And so she's observing that picture and saying, only this one looks like Kermit the Frog, bright green and blue and bug-eyed. How can that not make you happy? Did you know that dung beetles use the moon and the stars to navigate as they push their balls of dung along in a straight line? Did you know that platypuses have receptors that allow them to detect their prey by their electric fields? That mantis shrimp can not only break glass with its claw, but also has 16 kinds of cones in its eyes to see different colors, while we humans have a mere 3. The earth is amazing. The myriad beings, plant and animal, who inhabit the earth are amazing. And sure, it's not all bright feathered birds and cuddly pandas. It's hard to be delighted by, say, bedbugs. But even after all of the species we have lost, after all the habitats we have destroyed, the earth is home to an astonishing diversity and beauty. From majestic giant sequoias, which can draw water from the air as well as the ground, to the minuscule tardigrade, which is aquatic, but can live for a decade with no water at all. Happy Earth Day. Happy glass frog, platypus, sequoia, tardigrade, orchid, orca, Orkney Bowl Day. Happy day of celebrating the wonders that surround us, including the common grass under our feet. There is so much to be done, so much to heal, so many forces pushing against a life that is sustainable. The only way we will be able to find our way through will be through cherishing this holy place where we dwell, which was never given to us as a resource to exploit, but which holds us in sacred interdependence. May that sacred interdependence bring joy to you. Happy Earth Day. Did you want to speak again? I'd like to make just a little quick Earth Day announcement or two. Indulge me. First of all, thank you all for coming out. Second of all, Carlos has provided some refreshments for us, and I'd like to point out to you that at our request, he has found something other than plastic to serve them on. So when you go over to help yourselves, it's true that punch is in a plastic pitcher, but he's trying. And it's not easy, by the way.
Yes.
So the other thing is, please try to come out tomorrow for our program. It's going to be quite a step different from what we're doing, or have been doing all week with the 1 o'clock and so forth. We're having a guest speaker from the Urban Community Center that I think you'll really enjoy. He sounds like quite a person. I've not met him myself, but he's done wonderful things here and right down the street. He's a neighbor of ours. So I think that's it, Katie. Thank you very much.
Well, as she said, the treats are there. It's tomato and mozzarella cheese. And in little containers, so just treat yourself. And also, if anybody wants to plant a sunflower, as long as you're in the neighborhood, we're Judy Frankowiak and I are working on the sunflower project. Everybody gets a little container that we washed and cleaned out very carefully, because it's reusable, and dirt and 2 seeds to take care of in your own homes, and then at a future date we'll plant them in our community gardens. So thank you for coming, and thanks for the applause, and we really love being able to have an audience. So, see you later. Stop for oh, wait. And I love ice cream.